Hi, I'm Rosalind Morris. I am the producer and director of the film Are Zama Zama. And I'm very happy that today Yvette Christianse, South African novelist, poet, and scholar, has agreed to join me for a conversation about my film. She knows as much as anyone other than me about this film, having observed its making over the many years, and it's a real pleasure to share that conversation with others. Thank you, Yvette.
Hi, thank you. Let me begin with a simple question, and it's based on what I do know of you, and that is that you've been working in South Africa in, I think, the formal mining sector for almost 3 decades. So I'm wondering about the backstory of this film. At what point did you decide that you wanted to make a film? What made you want to make this film?
Well, it's true that I'm an anthropologist by training. I've been working in and around the gold mines of South Africa for a very long time, as you say. Um, but this film is about Zama Zama miners. That is a very special part of this world and one that has emerged in the last decade and become an increasingly prevalent part of the deindustrializing world, I would say. But as I got to know more and more people who were involved in that practice, which we can describe in a minute, as I met more and more people who shared their lives with me, described their experiences, I began to feel that it was very, very different from what I was hearing and seeing in the public sphere and in the mainstream media. And the gap between those representations was so great that it began to feel like a call. I felt it was necessary to tell a different story.
I mean, one of the things that absolutely gripped me is that is a scene in which these men are just going down a mine shaft, holding onto a cable that they've spliced together. I mean, my stomach just, you know, gripped. I was quite terrified for them. So I actually have a question then for you, and that is, why are they doing this? I mean, who are these people and why are they doing this?
So, who are these people? In my film, it's a very character driven film. It's a film built around the lives of three individuals from northern Zimbabwe. Um, you know, they come from this region, but Zama Zamas in general tend to be migrant workers, migrants who are in the informal sector. Many of them are undocumented. They come from all the places that used to send labor to the mines. I mean, then that have done so for the last 150 years. So Zimbabwe, Malawi, Lesotho, Mozambique, Eastern Cape. There are many people in this world, which is heterogeneous, full of different languages. And as you'll see in the film, and as you yourself have seen because you've watched it, they enter a world of terrifying danger and extreme precarity. And obvious question, why do they do it? Well, they tell you in the film why they do it. I mean, they are driven by desperate need from places that are economically unviable, from places that are politically oppressive. They are driven by various factors to a life that is on the, really at the limit. And it's only when you ask that question, what would lead someone to do that? Do you discern the crisis? It's really a regional crisis that is kind of you could say, the underground of this world in the underground.
So could you just say just a little about the mines that they're going into? Just because there's a scene where they're actually going down a hole in the ground. That's not what I understand about gold mining in South Africa.
Well, yes, indeed. Now, many large scale industrial gold mining continues in South Africa, but increasingly, as was predicted from the very beginning of the industry's creation, increasingly these mines are running dry, or they are no longer viable for capital intensive mining. And they are closed, but their shafts are often unsealed or they can be broken into. And if you think about the underground world made by those mines, tens of thousands of kilometers of underground tunnels and shafts that are 2 and 3 and 4 kilometers deep, those remain even after the mines have closed. And as one and the other mine closes, there is still residual gold in those areas, not enough to sustain capital intensive mining, but enough to support the physical labor of a person, of an individual's, bodily expenditures. Um, people enter those worlds, they no longer have dewatering. The, air is not being pumped in. They lack electricity, so there's no longer electrical transport. So you get the scene that, you yourself have observed, in which people are sliding down these tunnels with their bare hands, traversing impossible spaces with hope and luck, and doing things that one cannot avow. I mean, I'm certainly not, the film is not an effort to in some ways defend this practice, but it is an effort to make it understandable.
Okay, so it sounds very challenging for a filmmaker. How did you go about this? Like, what kind of camera crews, and who was willing to go into a space like this with you, and what kind of strategies did you have to employ to make this film?
Well, I have been incredibly lucky. I had the most extraordinary crew. I mean, it is an extreme guerrilla crew. We had 3 people, including myself. So the amazing cinematographer, my DP Ibrahim Haji, who's a brave and gentle soul, an incredibly generous person with a camera. And you can feel the trust of people in this film in the way that they respond to his camera. And my sound recordist, a Johannesburg-based man named Musa Khadebe, who was also a brave and gentle soul, and helped people to speak. And he was also a great translator, and he facilitated the film in important ways. But the 3 of us, that was our crew. And we had to be nimble and agile because we were filming in areas that are frankly dangerous, where we thought we might have to leave at any moment. And we also wanted to be as unobtrusive as possible. We felt that people would feel more comfortable if we were ourselves, few in number. And I think that's true. And I think you feel that in the film. But a large part of the footage underground was shot by the Zama Zama men who are at the center of the film. And I would be wrong. I would be remiss if I didn't name them, Bekani Mumpande, Prosper Mkuba, and Darren Menenge. And these are the 3 young men who showed up one day after I had let it be known that I was interested in hearing from people about their lives. And they showed up, and Ibrahim and I taught them how to use these cameras. They use GoPro S4s, which are lightweight, have long battery life, they have good light range, and they can be attached on a body harness, which we gave the men so that they could film underground. The idea was that they would carry it with them on trips they were already making. They didn't make any special trips for us. Mm-hmm. And they did so. And they did so partly as that was their plan, their ambition, to take the cameras and show us what journalists don't see, because they only go down those first 15 or 20 meters, as Ibrahim and I did, to see what's going on. But it's a world, and they wanted to film it all.
And so how did you meet them?
Well, as I said, and I do in my film practice what I do in my anthropological practice, which is I try to, in the worlds that I know or where I'm comfortable and where people are comfortable with me, I let it be known that I'm interested in learning from people. And if they wish to come talk to me, they know where to find me. I let people know where I'll be. Mm-hmm. I don't chase them. I don't pursue them. I don't ask people for names of other people. Only those people who wish to speak to me come. Mm-hmm. And this is how I met these 3 young men. I put out the word that I was interested. They showed up and they said, "We have a plan."
Let's talk about that plan. So did you have a sense, you knew you wanted to make a film because you felt that the Zama Zama were an interesting group of people, or that they were a group of people whose story should be known, right?
Yes.
So you had some idea of what you were going to do. They said they had a plan. How did you negotiate that? And what was their plan and what was yours?
Well, I mean, I had been doing very extensive life histories and interviews with people who were Zama Zama. So as I said, I knew that this was a life so far in excess of the cliches of the media. I wanted to make that story known. The plan that Bekani, Prosper, and Darren came with included their taking cameras underground. this was certainly in my mind, but the precise nature of it we had to work out. But I would say that in many ways what I imagined was absolutely repudiated by them, which isn't to say that they shaped the final film in entirely, but I had assumed, because it's a clandestine activity, that we would never show a face. I had assumed that no one would want to be identified or identifiable, that we would be using intense, short, depth of field, that things would be out of focus, that we would have a close-up of an eyelash or an ear or a thumb that would accompany narration.
Mhm.
And that was aesthetically what was in my mind as a strategy. And these young men said no. They said that they wished to tell their own story, that they had a right to have their own story told in the ways that they wanted to, and they wanted to be seen. And that dictated, or at least it set parameters for what was going to happen from then on.
Okay, so how long did it take you to film?
Well, that first sojourn underground that they made with their cameras was 3 days long. Now, Zama Zama spend days and weeks and sometimes even longer underground. They took those cameras on a 3-day sojourn, and wives or children or other people in the lives of Zama Zamas, once they went underground, all we could do was hope that they would come back up. There are many accidents and deaths underground, but
Yeah.
when we got that call and they said, we're okay, we're back, Ibrahim and I went out there, we got the cameras and the footage from them, and we dumped it and watched it down, and we were shocked. I mean, we had no idea what we would see, the extremity of that world, the challenges that they faced, but also we had no idea that there were so many people underground, and the joviality of the encounters and the meals shared and the music listened to. None of this was in my mind.
Mm.
I suppose even though people had said it, somehow you can't quite fathom until you've seen and heard, and I hope film viewers get that sense too. Until you've seen and heard, you can't really believe it. You can't grasp it. But then it was 2 more years. I mean, that the rest of the film is above ground.
Okay, there's so many things that I wanted to ask. I'm thinking about you saying how they stayed underground for days, because there are scenes in which they're sleeping, and just a eerily beautiful scene where they're laying back and sleeping, and one man is not, he's off to one side, he's still working quietly, but there's that tinny sound of a transistor radio playing.
It's not a transistor radio. The men
Oh,
carry cell phones underground, and they use it to listen to music.
oh,
Because
wow.
of course there's no reception underground. But
Oh,
what's
so they have,
stored on their phones they can listen to, and they're very knowing and sometimes competitive with the music that they listen to, and who's going to listen to what at what point.
Again, so all of this length of the film, you mentioned the young men that they could be from Zimbabwe or Malawi or Lesotho. These three young men, could you just say again where they're from? I mean, you don't have to say
Well,
exactly.
I'm not going to identify. I'm not going
Yeah.
to identify it too particular. They're from northern Zimbabwe, from very close to the border.
Mhm.
They speak Chitonga. They speak other languages as well. And underground is a world of many languages, and people greet each other. This is one of the things you learn, or I learned, from going through these many hours of footage. They greet each other in the languages that they think other people speak. There's an incredible hospitality of language underground, which makes for a really hard translation afterwards. But we could talk about that too. But um, that's their world. They share a language. They're distantly related. But as I said, that they're filming underground, which is a very substantial part of the film, is not the totality of the film.
Okay.
And interestingly, when I took different cuts, I always take the footage back to look at it with them. They
Mhm.
have the absolute right to withhold what they don't want seen by
Mhm.
others. There's been very little that they wanted to withhold, but there have been a few things, um, mostly in which they're speaking about their relations, whom they don't want to disparage in public. But I take the footage back, we look at it, we talk about it. I take the translations back, we look at it, and we talk about them. And I've differently played it for them and for people who are not Zama Zamas. And the people who are not Zama Zamas, they want to see more and more of the underground because to them it's mysterious and fabulous. But to the miners, they want to see the above ground world because that's what they live for.
Uh-huh.
Their meals together, their desires, there's also above ground work, but there's also the world of social life, and that is really important for them to be shown, lest they appear to be reduced to this mere task that they are forced to engage.
So can we talk then? Again, so many things came up, but let's just go back to the question of translation. When we talk about this translation, translating many languages, could you say something about the translation process?
Well, this was a Herculean task, let us say. It took 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
It took 2 years, I think dozens and dozens and probably hundreds of hours of footage in many languages because, of course, all the footage shot underground is in many languages. I wasn't present, obviously, beyond that very first moment. And in addition, all the very extensive life history interviews and other things, people could choose what languages they wanted to speak in and did so. So back in New York, we translated, and you'll say, how is that possible? Well, only in New York can you find people from those same places who speak those same dialects. And I worked with 2 people in particular whom I really want to praise. I mean, Noel Musukotwane, Zambian man, but from the area just across the river from where our Zama Zamas are from, and Tanya Nyati, also a Zimbabwean woman with many languages. And we worked week in, week out. All in all, believe it or not, we produced 10,000 subtitle cards. The whole film is subtitled. And don't worry, it's not all in the film. But we had to do that. We had to translate every single shot in order to decide what should be in this film, what will tell the story, what conversation. And of course, there's so much that has to be left out. But in the end, having all that fully translated and subtitled.
And have so the translations, I mean, do the Zama Zama in your film to Prosper, Bakani, and Darren, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
Translations.
I would take the translations and the versions of the footage back to South Africa. I continue to go back there, but also to exchange WhatsApp and audio notes on WhatsApp. To make sure that they believed it was correct. And there were some moments where we had made some kind of amusing errors, but by and large, they were very pleased with the translations. And Prosper Ntsuba has been a really special help in making sure that they're precise. And I feel like, I hope and believe that we have produced a very delicately translated, nuanced, translational film that allows for people to hear others speak as they speak and not simply in the kind of reduced telegraphic subtitling that sometimes one is driven to in a complex language world.
Right. So what kind of challenges would this have produced for editing?
Well, that's a good question. Pascal Trumel is my editor, and we also work very, very closely together, and he does not speak any of these languages, but he is a multilingual man with a great ear. And he, sometimes, of course, the length of an audio clip is not the same as the image clip, and you're stretching it across 2 shots or whatever. So it's really important that you not interrupt a word or a sentence or a phrase. And I mean, that was just a product of repeated listening, careful going back with the native speakers, the translators. And he acquired an incredible sense, an intuitive sense of the cadence and rhythm and shape of the languages. And, I think he just did a fantastic job.
It's because these 3 men have different ways of speaking, different cadences. And they really are just so compelling. And I want to talk a little bit about them and their lives. But I do want to talk also about them and what they represent in South Africa, or get you to talk about it. no matter how sympathetic we might be to these men, and there's a scene where Darren, I think it's Darren, is sitting in a room that's slightly a sort of yellowish room, and he's looking to the side. It is so beautiful, and yet it is not deliberately created to be beautiful. It's just the combination of him talking about his life and the ease. I think there's a real ease with which he's sitting and talking. You cannot not like these men or want to like them or hope for them, right? But it is true that in South Africa, they are considered criminal. Their activities are criminal. They're trespassing, right? And they're stealing gold, right? And then also there's if they're undocumented, then they have broken the law. How do you actually address this? Because I can just hear someone who's responding to the kind of image that you first saw in the media saying, this film is heroizing these men.
Look, I mean, exactly what you said is what I desire. I want you to like these people. They are likable. They are good people, driven to mad acts in desperation for no fault of their own. And they say, as they often do in the film and elsewhere, that they pursue this activity rather than worse options, rather than something that would have them appropriate personal private property or commit acts of violence or terrorize people. They're very clear about this, that it is an alternative for them. And that's very important. For them, Zama Zama is an alternative to violent criminality. It's not violent criminality. And in my experience, the vast majority of people working in that world in this way that's documented in this film are the victims and not the perpetrators of this kind of violence. Now, there is trafficking and human trafficking. There is gangsterism in this world, but that's not the case of the people that I'm at the heart of my film. And, that would be a different conversation. There is organized crime in that world, as in so many worlds. And it needs to be addressed. And nor would I want it to be thought that I'm advocating this kind of practice. It's terrible. It's dangerous. It's life-threatening. It's absolutely catastrophically injurious. Both the work below ground and the work, say, done by the women above ground. But these people are illegalized. I mean, we've already spoken about this. The whole history of mining in Southern Africa forced people to move, created dependencies, that can't be escaped. And so, again, I refer to them as illegalized rather than criminal. And I want to open up the conversation a little bit so that we can distinguish between organized crime and the desperate efforts of ordinary people. And maybe one should add to this that, the communities in which these people live are partly sustained. Even the illicit economy is sustained by the illicit, so-called illicit monies that come out of this world, right? I mean, rents are paid, transport is paid for, commodities are purchased with this little bits of gold. And you said, well, they're stealing gold. Well, I mean, the gold is of the earth. I mean, what?
I absolutely agree with you. Yeah.
Yes, some people got rights to it, but
I agree. I agree, but there is the reality of the law, right?
There is the reality of the law, and again, I'm not trying to evade the issue that befalls this. And I guess it was a couple of years ago, there were calls for the decriminalization of Zama Zama practice, and it was stated by the minister at the time that the one thing that you can't say we're just going to straightforwardly decriminalize is this deep underground mine. Insofar as you can't make that space safe for them. You can't read what needs to happen. And this is not an advocacy film.
It sounds like you're advocating. So I wanted to ask, do you think this film is going to advocate? Does it offer a solution? Like what needs to? Does that happen in the film? Okay.
No, the film doesn't offer any solutions. The film tries to open, audiences' eyes and ears so that they might reflect on. I'm glad you caught me out on this. So that they might reflect on the issues in a more complex way. But in my own opinion, the only way to deal with this kind of phenomena is not to criminalize or decriminalize. I mean, you need economic repair on a regional level. But this is not the purpose of the film. The purpose of the film is to open a world and provide a space for these people to tell audience members what their lives are like.
Okay, so not heroizing. I do want to come to the question of the women. You mentioned the women, and there's so many things that you said that I could follow up, but we have to talk about the women. Yeah, but although mining is a predominantly masculinist or male, let's just say male activity in the labor, the truth is that historically, those migrant workers that the South African mines were so dependent on, those miners from Mozambique or Malawi, Lesotho or Zimbabwe, they left their wives and their families behind. In fact, it was required of them. They were not allowed to bring them in case they settled, right? So talk a little bit about the women who are in this world and where they fit into the Zama Zama existence.
I mean, I guess I'd say a couple of things. The first is that, the period you're describing, the sort of forced separation and same-sex, single-sexed hostile world. I mean, that of course has been gone for a long time, okay. but it since really late 80s, 90s. But separately from that, you're right. I mean, it's still predominantly, despite the fact that even in the formal mines, women can now have jobs deep underground. Very, very few do, but some do. In this world, women generally don't go underground, but they are still very involved in the process. And what you see in this film, what I want you to see in this film, and what's never in the news coverage of this, is that it's women who are, at least in the area where I work, it's women who are grinding the rock, crushing it, turning it into this fine, fine powder that can be sluiced and amalgamated and smelted and turned into gold, which they, by the way, refer to as money, all from start to finish. They are doing this incredible labor, and you remember that gold is embedded in a kind of quartz in South Africa. So that, I mean, they're basically grinding what is then breathing a rock dust that is akin to glass. So I mean, hugely dangerous. And women are vulnerable to that, that disease that we, throughout the history we have known of and referred to as miner's lung, and we assume it's, the disease of men underground. But in this case, it's also the disease of women above ground. That's spoken of by the women in the film. And one of the aesthetic strategies of that part of the film, which is admittedly driven by the characters who are the men going underground, but the aesthetic strategy of the film is to make you feel and and hear that grinding. So I mean, you're as close as you can get. I mean, Ibrahim was shooting, right, with a short lens right there, with these women as they're grinding and crushing, and the sound is sometimes unbearable. And I would say, like, throughout this film, one of the strategies I used was to take you as far as you could go as a viewer, sensorially, until you might want to turn away. And then to stop, but that's really important part of the film.
I mean, I know when look, I'm doing this. I'm in the film trying to wipe that dust away, and I know every now and then there's a moment where a woman is talking about the strategies that are used. That if you drink milk, you clear your lungs. Oh my God! But I wanted to cough. Right, I kept wanting to cough this dust up, but it seems that the women are. It's not all the women are involved in this mining.
No, this is true, and I raised it because it's so important to this world. But of course, there are many women in this world, women who are wives, women who are the mothers of children with the men who go underground, other women who are, for example, selling snacks and cigarettes and or other, or the accoutrements of mining in the areas where people mine. A whole world there, a whole economy.
I was going to say an entire economy. So what you have is this informal activity, and a formal economy.
Well, that informal activity is feeding the formal economy. I mean, it's impossible, in fact, to draw a line. You know, those supposedly ill-got monies are paying for rent, they're paying for commodities, it's going into transport costs, it's going into clothing. You know, it immediately is feeding that whole world. I'll tell you, I mean, if there was no solution, no alternative to Zama Zama practice, and you simply sealed off all those shafts, the economies in those areas would collapse very quickly.
Right.
It's now that only tells you the magnitude of the phenomenon and the problem. But again, this film is not a kind of, I am an anthropologist, but this film is not a kind of visual book. I mean, it's really, it's 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 a following, a moving along the lines of lives as they unfold in ways that are unpredictable. I mean, as we know, things happen, right?
Can you talk about the unfolding? Because there's something I noticed at the beginning of the film. You get to know these faces. At the end of the film, there's a change, and in one instance, it's quite a radical change to the man's face.
I'm not gonna give it away, but I will say, you know, the film is in 3 segments, and the first one basically covers a year in the lives of these miners, and I kind of thought we would maybe stop there. You know, you asked earlier, is this what you thought it would be? Kind of thought we would stop there. We were working on translations back in New York, um, and then 2 of the men in the film were shot in incidents in their community, different incidents. Both survived, but of course, it was completely transformative for them psychically and physically. And I thought, no, we must. Now this is a different film. Must go back and see what that does to a life. You know, how does one learn to live in the aftermath of that? So that then turned the film into a different kind of project, a project that would be unfolding with lives.
Right.
Then when, you know, with the fall of Mugabe from power, when everyone thought, oh, you know, all migrants from Zimbabwe are going to go back to Zimbabwe, which did not happen.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh, I must go back again, must talk again, must hear what they have to say about it. And I must say, I mean, this is the culminating sequence in the film, their conversations about the politics of Zimbabwe, about the politics of the region, about what is the relationship between democracy and employment are, you know, mind-bogglingly smart. And this is something else that I hope comes through in the film, the incredible intelligence, the wit, and the analytic acuity of these people.
Yeah, you know, what I actually was so grateful for, and was the fact that this is not poverty porn, misery porn, poverty porn, and it's not, oh, let's have a feel good,
right, exactly,
a recuperative narrative, right?
I wanted to skirt those 2 possibilities, as exactly as you say, poverty porn on one end, and the consoling narrative of, what is it now, resilience, I suppose. And you know, if I learned something in the course of making this film, it was exactly how they inhabit and skirt these 2 poles.
Right.
So the film testifies to their desires, their joys, their capacities for survival, their escapism, their, you know, debauchery, their all these things, as well as their fears and anxieties, and the traumas that afflict them, that haunt them. But my sense of what can be learned from it is precisely that they evade these two poles, and that they're not reduced to, I suppose, what theorists would call bare life. You know, they're much more than that.
Yes. So which, and I feel I've been asking you so many questions, I should let you get a break now. It brings me to this question, which is going to be asked of you. And you can hear it. It's the steam engine coming down the railway, because it's about your relationship to this film. And you know, the question that I'm skirting is,
what's a white girl from Canada doing in the ruins of the gold mines of South Africa, well, yes, it's of course the foreseen question. It's a right question. It's a righteous question and a necessary one. I don't I'm not unhappy to address it. So, I mean, audiences will have to judge themselves how they feel about that. I feel that the people in the film have made their judgment,
Right.
and their judgment is to make this an opportunity to speak their own stories. I'm certainly, it's but I feel like I have a responsibility, which is comes from two places, I suppose. One is, my father was learned the art of mind management in South Africa, though he wasn't from that country and he didn't stay there. So I'm somehow implicated in this world, and I feel that a responsibility befalls those who are implicated. But I think we're all implicated in it. All of us who are the beneficiaries of the world that gold made are responsible for listening to and finding a way of responding to the lives of those that are not the beneficiaries of it. As far as it goes, my grandfather, as opposed to my father, was himself an underground miner, and he lived and died with miner's lung, and that attuned me from a very young age to the costs of mining, which, mining makes a lot of things possible, but it also takes a bitter and unequal toll. So partly, not exclusively, partly the film is an effort um, to bear witness and to accept. It's the fulfillment of that responsibility. I don't think we get to turn away from it,
No, I absolutely. And there is something that you said, and I just want to note it because it's so important. Is that when you say a righteous question, it can also become a self-righteous question, in the way that the self-righteous question would not attend to the fact of who's in the film and how they're responding to the film being made. I mean, one has to trust that the people in the film have some sense of how to negotiate with a white woman, how to work with a white woman.
Well, I've tried to describe the process of making it available without chasing people down. I should also say that they always had the right, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, that they had the right to withhold footage that they did not want to be seen by others. You do your best. And
Right.
then as I said, to not do it when I have the privilege and the means to access the means of communication, the modes of communication. When you have the privilege and the access and you don't use it, then I think you are in a much more dangerous place, a much more culpable place, than if you are in a place of privilege and you have access to the means and you do use it. And that's what this film is an effort to do.
Okay, truly the last question, and that is, you don't want to say it's not an advocacy film, and I don't want to ask you, did you learn something from this film? But what kind of impact did the film make on you, or have
Oh,
on
it
you?
changed everything for me. I mean, it changed the way I see the world. I mean, I hope it'll change the way other, viewers see the world. To travel somewhat with others, to learn with and from them in a process like this. Um, so far from my experience, of course, in ways that have entangled me in the lives of these people for forever. It's not, I continue to be in relations with these people. This is a life-changing experience for me, but that of course is not of interest to film viewers. What matters, I think, for me and for them, I hope, is that their world will be enlarged by this too, and that they will think and act perhaps a little differently as a result.
I need to let you go now, but thank you, and thank you for this film.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation. All right. Bye.
Bye.